and why I believe he is the one that will show up onto the scene after the economic collapse. But yeah, Blavatsky certainly was a foundational piece, if you will, for just the whole New Age movement, just kind of in general. I mean, when we study Albert Pike and his morals and dogma, it's very clear that Freemasonry in and of itself is a worship of Lucifer in the end. And there have been certain notable Jews and Freemasons to come out and say this. Now, your everyday Mason doesn't know this because there's ranks. And so they're, more of your, as we talked about before, the impotent humanitarianism. I mean, they're out and it's kind of like a brotherhood, but you can be a part of any religion and be a Freemason. But it's also ultimately this specific sect, which these Jews are using to ultimately subvert the Catholic Church and doctrine, and ultimately bring about their new Messiah who will rule from the Third Temple, as mentioned before.
Okay, and our caller had hung up, so but I got more questions here.
Yeah.
Ethug asks, but I remember a day when we actually had names, and it's so funny, such a Ethug. Okay, Ethug asks, could you ask the guest if he thinks the anti-pope is involved in the international trafficking of child sex slaves?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's a couple of websites out there. I think his name is Kevin Arnett, and I don't want to give credence to him because he's got a very weird belief structure. I mean, I saw a video the other day on him where he's talking about God and using it in a feminine sense. So he's got a very strange belief structure. But listen, as a part of this satanic cabal, which has overrun the Catholic Church, there is certainly these ritual sacrifices going on. I have no such proof that he is actually in on it, if you will, as some people are suggesting. But I do believe he's a high-ranking Freemason. So let's say if that did come out one day in some sort of court of law, I mean, would that surprise me? No, it wouldn't at all. And as Father Malachi Martin, before the Second Vatican Council, there was actually a formal enthronement of Lucifer in the Vatican, in and around Rome. And it actually took place in South Carolina, too, in Columbia, South Carolina, in the early 60s. So it was kind of like an ode to Lucifer, like, hey, it's time to get the New Age rolling. Let's get Vatican II in play. Let's implement these Freemasonic principles, and let's start preparing the world for the formal New Age and the New World Order in general, which from an economic level, as many of you should know, it's going to be highly socialistic, ultimately socialistic Marxist in the end. And it's one of the things that the seers at Garabandal had talked about, kind of a communist tribulation period before this warning event occurred. But yeah, that's a good question. In general, yeah, there's definitely satanic ritual sacrifices going on. The pedophilia is tied into it. There was one such case in Chicago where Father Malachi Martin alluded to. There was one priest who actually killed a nun, like at Mass or after Mass. I forget exactly how the story goes, but he was tried and ultimately convicted of killing this nun in a ritualistic murder. I mean, so they're hiding behind the collar, if you will. That's what people have to understand. Just because you wear a bishop's mitre, that doesn't mean you're Catholic, folks. If you're not following what the Catholic Church has always taught, you're not really Catholic. You're Catholic with a K. I mean, you could profess to be Catholic like Pelosi. I mean, Pelosi's anything but Catholic. So, don't fall for the nonsense. 9 out of every 10 people, if not more, who identify themselves as Catholics, sadly due to Vatican II, aren't on the objective level. And I'm not trying to condemn their soul or anything. That's for Jesus to judge. But objectively speaking, they're not following the Catholic religion because of this Vatican II Council.
All right, I'm going to give you just a couple more here, and then I'll let you get back to what you want to talk about here. When will we be able to start seeing Planet X in the sky, and where?
Yeah, that's a good question. Listen, I've had all the top Planet X researchers on. There's some like Steve Olson who I think would argue you could see it right now. For me, I don't have an honest answer. When I feel that I'm not qualified in that sense to give you an answer, like, okay, like, it will happen here, here, and here, like a time frame. I can't do that, really. I don't think really any of us really know. I had David Mead on, who would be a great guest for your show.
I've talked with David Mead. I've talked to, I don't know, there might not be too many I haven't encountered.
Okay, good. So you've had David on. Well, he's suggesting that, in the very least, towards the end of this year, he thinks maybe we'll be hit by a comet, which ties in with end-time prophecy, by the way. We know Wormwood in Revelation will be hit by a comet. So I've been telling people for years, get off coastlines, get out of major cities because of the economic collapse of martial law coming. Get out while you can. And there's a good number of people who are taking that advice and wanting to move. By the way, I get people emailing me all the time, where to go, where to move. But anyways, and this ties in with Catholic prophecy as well. St. Hildegard talked about this end time comet to hit, and specifically America being affected. Lost my train of thought. So with Planet X. Now,
Yeah.
for me, the kicker in all this, the climactic event is going to be the 3 days of darkness. And this kind of ties in with CERN, which I think we talked about slightly last time. These New World Order freaks are trying to open up a Stargate, a wormhole, however you want to put it, to literally merge dimensions, to merge the immaterial with the material. And this is where I guess, again, I would argue that we're not dealing with interplanetary beings. We're going to be dealing with interdimensional beings, kind of like in those, what's that movie, The Avengers, where they shoot that thing off into the sky, a black hole opens up, and you see all these, these really weird creatures coming through from the other side. I mean, that's literally how the Blessed Virgin Mary describes it to Marie Julie Jeheni. And she said, listen, if you're not inside on that Thursday or Friday or Saturday, you will die of fright. And if certain measures are not taking place to do certain things like get blessed candles from a traditional Catholic priest, you have no light in your house. On the basis of those who are not in a state of grace, if you will, who are leading ungodly lives, they will perish in their own homes, even if they're in their homes, due to fright of the thunder and lightning that will be occurring. So just imagine that on the basis of just how powerful the thunder and lightning will be. And I know, listen, I actually like thunderstorms. I think you mentioned you didn't.
I'll be one of those people under the table.
Okay, yeah. Well, just imagine it to such a degree where after three days, basically, it's 72-hour period, where as Planet X gets closer, I mean, just the effects it's going to have on this planet are just unimaginable. I mean, just the shaking alone, as certain Planet X experts have described it. I mean, it's going to be like we're being locked on like a magnet, and we're going to shake literally for 3 days straight, like a 10.0 earthquake. Okay, I have never sat through any earthquake, and I've had friends who said, a 5.0 is pretty scary, even just for a minute. Can you imagine 72 hours of just the whole world shaking? It's called like a mini judgment. Our Lady of Heat suggests. We can get into that maybe a little bit too.
Did you say 72 hours?
Yeah, this thing will be locked onto us for that period as it's making its orbit and going back out into deep space. At its most closest point, yeah, it'll be locked onto us.
Would that not lead to some kind of pole shift or continents kind of moving around? I would think.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I believe we're going through a pole shift now. We're seeing weird weather. We're seeing snow in Hawaii. Snow is being reported upon in the Sahara Desert and some Middle Eastern areas. Some funny videos out there on YouTube. These people are like seeing snow for the first time. Like, what in the world is this stuff? It's not supposed to snow in certain areas of the world, at least under normal circumstances. So I've had on Ben Davidson. You probably had him on as well. We've talked about this. Magnetic reversal, pole shift. He also believes in the thesis or synopsis that eventually, as Planet X gets closer, the magnetosphere will go down. And that's another point that Anthony Patch brings up, that I had him on again for the second time a couple weeks ago, where he said that due to the CERN program, it's affecting our force field, if you will, our magnetosphere, and it's decreasing it. So if you want to know my honest opinion, I think they're trying to perpetrate kind of a fiery sacrifice. I mean, they want the magnetosphere to go down, so ultimately this CME will come down and burn or scourge a third of the earth, which comes from Revelation 8:7. It comes from the message of Akita, wherein the Blessed Virgin Mary says that this fire coming down from heaven will spare neither priest nor faithful. The people who survive that particular aspect will find themselves so desolate they will wish they are dead. That was also relayed to Blessed Sister Ayala, where Blessed Virgin Mary actually starts mentioning specific countries that are going to get chastised. Russia is one of them. A decent portion of Russia is going to be burnt up in this CME, this fire raining down. But yeah, it's definitely a very interesting topic. And like you, I kind of sit back and listen to those who really do this more on a daily basis, and I try to absorb like a sponge and say, okay, we can give a more general time frame. Now, we'll get into the star sign later. The 3 days of darkness, in my opinion, is in the very least about 12, 13 years away. I don't think it's right down upon us as, like before it's news is reporting.
I'll tell you this. We get into a three days of darkness, and I'll be thinking of you and everybody else who's come on this show and warned me that was coming.
Well, listen, yeah, and that's one of the things, hopefully, God willing, we're able to do. I keep a track of certain things on a daily basis, and as we are getting closer, listen, the world will have enough warning, and that's what we're going to get into, because this warning that we're going to talk about after the next few questions is basically mankind's last chance to correct their conscience. And it's very, very interesting that the mainstream media is using the exact same verbiage that the Blessed Virgin Mary had apparently relayed at this one visionary site called Garabandal, which is somewhat controversial in the Catholic Church. I'll get into that after we finish a few more questions. But listen, the world will be long war, and it's not like God just kind of acts out of nowhere, and things start to happen. We were always getting warnings. I mean, take a look at the story of Noah. I mean, the world was warned for how long, and they called him a loon bin and a nut job. It finally happened. What happened? They closed up the ark, and which, by the way, from a Catholic perspective, is actually symbolic for the Blessed Virgin Mary and the Catholic Church. Only 8 people survived during that period, and that's why as Catholics we hold this very strong devotion to the Blessed Virgin Mary, and obviously staying close to the Catholic faith and sacraments, because there's going to be very few people to move through this, what I call great storm. But the 3 days of darkness is just, when I sit and kind of think about it, it's really going to be unimaginable, everything kind of happening at one point. And one of those things being is that every devil from hell will be let loose, and they literally will roam the streets, and they are so hideous that the Blessed Virgin Mary says if you even try to go peek outside in curiosity, you'll die of fright. So there's any numerous ways that if you're not in a state of grace due to the thunder and the lightning bolts, due to just the darkness itself, due to these devils being unleashed, it's going to be pandemonium, to say the least, during the heights, if you will, of chastisement.
Wow. Okay. And let's see. We got what's the other question here? Let's see. Guest asks why Vatican built telescope Lucifer. That's one. And then there's another one here about Scientology. So your thoughts on Scientology and your thoughts on the Vatican, who is said to have built the telescope Lucifer.
Well, Scientology, just really in brief, obviously, as a Catholic, we believe any other form of quote unquote faith is not from God, if you will. I know Leah Remini, I think is her name, who kind of came out, and she's doing an expose. I'm trying to get her on my show, by the way. She's very difficult to get a hold of. I saw her do an interview with Joe Rogan recently, but she's been kind of exposing that and Tom Cruise and all that good stuff. But she's a Catholic now. As far as I know, she actually came back to the Catholic faith, and I was just curious as whether she's following Vatican II or not, because I'd like to kind of clue her in.
I was trying to get her on my show too, and you're right, she is a hard one to get a hold of.
Yeah, I've tried several times now. I'm going to keep trying, and hopefully we have a breakthrough. But yeah, in general, it's false. But the question with what was the other one concerning the Lucifer telescope? Yeah, so there are actually numerous telescopes all around the world. One, of course, is in the Vatican. Certain Jesuits are keeping their eyes on the skies, if you will. There's actually one in Australia called Project Wormwood, which will give you an indication of what they're looking for. They actually, on their website, it's in Australia, they actually give that scripture of wormwood, so it gives you an idea of what they're paying attention to. Obviously, they're paying attention to this inbound comet and just in general, the Planet X system. But the Lucifer telescope, what people don't realize is it's not completely owned by the Vatican. They actually have a minority share in that particular building. But essentially, as Father Malachi Martin said, they do have their eyes on the skies. They're waiting for certain celestial signs to occur, which is what we're going to get into next concerning these stars colliding and the star sign of Maitreya. Okay. And ultimately, in my opinion, based upon where they deem Planet X is, they're able now to get across some more of their nefarious agendas. I mean, because they could pull the economic collapse. I mean, they could pull the rug out beneath our feet at any point in time.
They could pull anything. Yeah, you're right. The rug. Yeah, I mean, I was going to say they could do anything, financial or otherwise. I mean,
well, even with wars. I mean, World War III. I mean, so what I'm saying is based upon where they believe Planet X is, and that's when they'll start getting across certain agendas of theirs. Now, from the New Age side of things, Maitreya talks about a fiery tribulation period before people can even be indoctrinated by taking the mark of the beast. So they're well aware on their end that there are, all hell's going to break loose in the world too. They kind of see it like a survival of the fittest situation, almost kind of like Darwinism, I guess. So that's what we call, from a Catholic Christian perspective, tribulation. I mean, we're going to go through all hell before Maitreya even shows up.
Oh yeah.
Before hell himself shows up, we're going to go through hell.
Well, it seems like that's already kicking up. Somebody's got the heat on low, I think, already, because there's a lot going on. I mean, you're getting lawlessness in the streets of this country. I mean, like we've never seen before. It seems like things are changing globally, like just incredibly, and to a point where, there's a lot of resistance.
Absolutely. And, I wanted to take time out and just to thank you, Michael, for all your work. I know you put together a wonderful program, and you should be commended, just not only for the good work that you do, but just the willingness to actually hear people like me out. Because I've been out there, and I said this publicly, the last major prejudice in the world truly is against the Catholic religion. I mean, even by mentioning the word Catholic, you're probably going to get like 10 comments under this. Oh, that nasty Catholic, he's just nasty. He's going to hell. He's Babylon, horror. I mean, you're just going to get all these ridiculous comments. And yet, when I mention how the Jews are behind the New World Order, I get labeled a neo-Nazi. I get labeled the next Hitler. And yet I can prove it with quotes from the Jews and the Masons themselves that they're behind the New World Order. So my point is, you can't say anything about, Jews being behind the New World Order, but hey, you want a Catholic bash, go on and do it. And this is the reason why we're going to get chastised, by the way. God's had just about enough of people bashing his church and his people, and it's going to get nasty. It's going to be beyond our wildest comprehension. If you could sit tonight and just imagine all of the worst possible things happening at once, you haven't even breached the half of which we are going to be able to see here in the future. So I wanted to commend you just for allowing me to come on here, and hopefully we can do this on a more regular basis. As I told Rex over at Leak Project and SGT Report and some of these other alternative news sites. But I didn't mention this.
I say you bet, absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, the last time you were on, I mean, people could shy at it all they want. There's a lot of people interested in what you have to say, and so it goes without saying. There's a lot of people who are on board. I think a lot of people are afraid to speak up, though.
Sure. Yeah. And like I said, I always keep open communication lines for those who are of goodwill, who are really trying to figure out what we're saying from the Catholic perspective. You can email me at apostleofmary@hotmail.com. But just to kind of throw a quick plug in, you can find me on by searching Tradcat Night on YouTube and Twitter. That's TradCatKnight. I've got like over 1,300 videos. I do daily updates, breaking news. We cover a whole section on Vatican II, a whole section on Catholic end time prophecy. I have my own radio show, as I mentioned. But the main website is tradcatnight.blogspot.com, updated daily, 15+ articles on a daily basis. I mean, we're pumping out a lot of information. I also wanted to say, to speaks to your point, Michael, listen, as a foundation, it's traditional Catholics basically plugged in, but I'm like a go-getter. I'm kind of like that cold caller who's going to knock on your door, not like in Jehovah's Witness type fashion. I mean, I don't do that like door to door, but I meant like out in social media land. And I'm connected to a whole lot of people on Twitter. You would be surprised how many celebrities, athletes, government officials, media types, international models even, who are following me and asking questions. I had a libertarian candidate whose name eludes my mind. She was a black lady. I mean, she knew she had virtually no chance. But she messaged me out of nowhere this past year, wanting to know more about the message of Fatima. So I was teaching her off to the side. And then, again, I'm not too much into the entertainment industry, but I remember one of the lead actors in a Game of Thrones, gave me a shout out, gave me a retweet at one point. So listen, it's not just, Catholics who are paying attention to the things we're saying. Like, everyone is seeing what we're seeing. It's just like, okay, what interpretation do you have of it? Right? I mean, it's kind of like with this star sign coming, there's going to be a new age perspective to it, but then there's going to be the things that we're saying about it. It's all your perspective on the matter. Same thing with UFOs too, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we would say demons of the air. Maybe others would say, okay, maybe that's interplanetary things. So it's really your perspective. We're both seeing something, but what is the take on that? So I just wanted to, give you a little shout out and make sure you subscribe to Michael's YouTube channel and make sure you're tuning into his radio shows, because it's got a lot of good content. And
well, I thank you. And you just don't know how long shows like mine or yours will be here. If we don't stand up and defend what's ours, I mean, they just as soon wipe stuff like this out.
Yeah, I've already been censored. I can't even put my own blogs up, retweet my own information onto Twitter. I'm labeled a malicious site when I go to go ahead and try to do that. I've had videos pulled down on YouTube. I've been banned half a dozen times on Facebook and this or that.
I had YouTube just flag me for the shirt that I was a virtual reality video I put up. The kids got me to do some virtual reality, and I had a shirt. I guess Stewie from Family Guy was on.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And so they tell me that because I didn't blank that out, then they monetized the video for that company. It's like, I'll delete it before I let you do that. I bought this shirt. What the hell, So what? I mean, would you rather I was naked on video or what? Jeez.
Oh, goodness. Yeah, you never know. Like I said, we're being labeled fake news. We know who the fake news is. It's the mainstream media. Yeah. So, I don't know if you want to kind of jump into this star sign now, because this is pretty important. This is something that I've been waiting to hear just when the mainstream media and these certain Talmudic Jews were giving us a date for this, because this would give us a more, not that a clear indication on our general timeline, but it would give us just a better sense of Maitreya's arrival, this Antichrist.
Sure.
And so, as a foundation, Michael, I believe we talked about this before. that much like in counterfeit fashion, how the three magi followed the star of Bethlehem and followed that star and ultimately arrived at the true Christ, Jesus, we know, right, from a Christian perspective. In very similar counterfeit fashion, Antichrist Maitreya, that's essentially how he arrives onto the scene. And again, all poop has to hit the fan before he even arrives onto the scene. And so we're going to talk about this star sign. Now, this comes from one of his henchmen who recently died. He was kind of the spokesman for this false prophet, Yeshua ben Joseph, and Antichrist Maitreya. His name was Benjamin Krem, which maybe perhaps you have heard of. I mean, he's been around since like the 70s, but he's like the spokesman for him. Well, he says this. This was in 2009. In the very near future, people everywhere will have the opportunity to witness an extraordinary and significant sign, the like of which has been manifested only once before at the birth of Jesus. Then, according to Christian teaching, a star appeared in the heavens and led three wise men from the east to the birthplace of Jesus. Soon, once again, a star-like luminary of brilliant power will be seen around the world. Okay, so in 2008, about the same year, there was a piece in the Telegraph out there in the UK where it was talking about how this new star sign, a new star, would usher in the new Messiah into the world. So it penetrated mainstream. So I'm just building a platform here to show you from the New Age perspective that there would be a star sign to usher in this Antichrist figure. Now, go figure, we have these certain Talmudic Jews. Again, we have to realize, folks, again, listen, I'm not a Jew hater, this or that, but the Jews in general do not embrace our Lord. They certainly don't embrace the Catholic Church. Now, I'm not talking about individual Jews. I happen to know some good traditional Catholic Jews. We're speaking in the broad context now. We're speaking on the objective level. This came about, this piece of information, Michael, from Breaking Israel News, which is a pretty, I don't know, it's used often by, I see a lot of Christians who are Zionists, who are being duped by the Zionist heresy. But it was also on WND, other major platforms. I think Breitbart maybe even covered it. But get this. New star to appear in the night sky, heralding in the prophecy of the Messiah. Now, the article goes on to say 5 years from now, the light from an ancient collision of two stars will reveal a brand new star. So a collision of two stars that would produce a new star in the night sky. Now, according to Jewish esoteric sources, this is precisely the celestial phenomenon which will accompany the arrival of the Messiah. The new star is expected in 2022 in a blaze of light called a nova, which will be the heaviest heavenly body visible in the nighttime sky for about 6 months. So it's going to hang around for a while.
Now well, the one I read said that it could likely be in our sky. We'll see it for 2 to 3 years in our sky.
Yes.
So it looks to me like we're being prepared to see something that we shouldn't see in our sky, and this is why I will not close the door on this whole Planet X thing. But go ahead.
Well, you know what? With this, I don't think this is going to be Planet X, though. I actually thought that initially. I don't firmly believe that what the star will be seen in the sky is Planet X. I might be wrong, Michael, but I don't think so, because along the prophetic timeline, if the worst of the worst happens in the 3 days of darkness when Planet X is most closest, it would seem probably more likely that maybe a year or two beforehand would be this, what we call the sign of the Son of Man, by the way. I've done videos on this. You can search.
Well, here's my thing. I mean, we've been around for a long time, right? I mean, how come we haven't seen these new stars popping up in the sky from collisions before? Yes. Now, all of a sudden, we're going to see that? I get a little...
I'm right there with you. We're definitely being prepared, folks. I mean, and they give a date. Okay, so now, connecting what I just said previously concerning Antichrist Maitreya, now we're seeing it from these certain Jews who are preparing the third temple, which we know from Catholic tradition, the early church fathers said the Antichrist would rule from the third temple and basically make Jerusalem the capital of the world. We've got interesting note here, because what ties in with that even is, from a Catholic point of view, is what we call the warning, or an illumination of conscience, which will come at a very dire point in time when most people obviously have turned away from just Christianity in general. Basically, it's been demonstrated that communism will make a worldwide sweep, a literal sweep, not just by way of ideology, but I mean by way of military force, if you will. How do we put this? It will be, well, let me just go right to the site. Now, again, as I mentioned, Garabandal was a site in Spain, which apparently, or purportedly, the Blessed Virgin Mary came and basically started warning the world again. And again, it's a little bit controversial. There's elements in it that raise my eyebrows. I personally kind of stay away from it, but there's elements in it that are true, if that makes sense, because it was reiterated before by previous saints and also another approved source in the church called Our Lady of Heed, and I'm going to get to that in a second. But the basic thing, listen how this is described, Michael. This is a kicker. And instantaneously, once I saw this news break on the mainstream media, this is immediately what came to mind. Question concerning this warning. Would you repeat for us what you know about the warning? And this is basically someone interviewing these children who were receiving these messages about the warning. Answer. What I remember now is that the Virgin told me that before the miracle, God will be sending us a warning to us to purify us or prepare us to see the miracle, and in this way may draw enough grace to change our lives towards the true God. She told me that the warning will consist. She did tell me what the warning will consist of, but not the date. I'm not able to say what it consists of, but I'm able to say more or less what it will be like. Here comes the kicker. It's a phenomenon which will be seen and felt in all of the world and everywhere. I've always given an example of that of two stars colliding in the sky. This phenomenon will cause physical damage, but it will horrify us because at that moment we will see our souls and all the harm we have done. So basically what we're trying to say is, whatever this nova experience, these two stars colliding, time is going to stop somehow. And don't ask me. I'm not a scientist. I have no idea. Okay? And it's said to be for maybe about 5 minutes. It's not going to be like 2 hours or 3 hours. It's been described as a shorter period of time, if you will. Everyone's going to stop. It doesn't matter what religion you are, whether you're Catholic or you're not, everyone will experience this on earth. And you're going to see your soul as God sees it. And it's going to be frightful for the majority because most souls live outside of a state of grace. And you would basically know that day whether you were going to hell or not. So it's basically like your last chance, like, hey, you get it together or this is it, basically. Now, what's interesting, of course, is the terminology of these two stars colliding, which we just described here. And we even gave you a date, according to these certain Jews. But we have St. Edmund Campion, back in the 1500s, warned us of what he called this illumination of conscience. He called it the day of change. He says, I pronounce a great day, not wherein any temporal potentiate should minister, but wherein a terrible judge should reveal all men's consciences and try every man of every kind of religion. Blessed Tiagi, 1700, said the same thing. A great purification will come upon the world, preceded by an illumination of conscience, in which everyone will see them as God sees them. Now, listen to this one. This one's even more precise. Our Lady of Heed, which was 20 years after Fatima. Fatima was 1917. This one was in Germany. This is approved by the Catholic Church. This is just a portion of the message. And basically, the overall message is no one's paying attention to Fatima, so God is going to chastise us. Our Lord talks about this star. He says, I will come with my peace, with a few faithful to build up my kingdom. As a flash of lightning, this kingdom will come. I will give them a special light. For some, this light will be a blessing. For others, darkness. This light will come like a star that showed the way to the wise men. Again, perfectly describing a star being seen in the sky. And he said that based upon those who are in a state of grace, those who are, it will be kind of a blessing, kind of a reassurance, like, okay, I'm on the right path. For others, it will be darkness and kind of like, hey, I need to get it together, so to speak. So I want to say that I wanted to put that out there for my Catholic listeners because it is approved in church. It's just been taught traditionally in the church outside of Garabandal. So Garabandal, even though it's somewhat dubious, certain elements that I don't consider to be necessarily truthful, it was just reiterated. So, wow. I mean, I've been waiting for them to give a timeline on this for quite some time. And so we see how they're starting to rebuild the third temple. They're actually asking Trump and Putin to come in and help them, build the third temple. And I think Trump's going to back out of that whole U.S. embassy in Jerusalem there, which from a Catholic perspective is a good thing. But the bottom line is folks, I mean, we're kind of peering down on this certain event, which all men will go through. Now, the kicker is, I'll let you jump in before I get into Kathleen Keating. Michael, I'll kind of catch my breath here because there's some more to this.
It's okay. I'm listening.
Oh, okay. Let me just get a little drink here.
Okay. All right.
So there was this individual, Kathleen Keating, who is a traditional Catholic apologist who has a book. You can actually go and research this right now. If you go to Google, type in Kathleen Keating, Keating. She has a book called The Warning. So she wrote a notable book on this, and she handles it from a Catholic prophetic view. She also warned about the alien deception too, by the way, for your listeners behind this, and kind of like the convergence of the immaterial and the material world. She also warned of Antichrist Maitreya. She started tooting his horn publicly. She was on Rent's radio with Jeff Rentz and a few others coast to coast, and she had an experience. And I don't cut me off if I told this story because, again, I do a lot of media appearances, and I can't recall if I mentioned this story. But she lived out in Nebraska, and one night her dog started barking. And so she went up to go see what was going on at her back porch, and there was a man pacing back and forth in her backyard. This is in the middle of Nebraska. She's like living in a rural area.
Oh, hell.
And so she immediately freaks. I mean, that would instantaneously freak you. So she goes, back, kind of opens the door and just says, very cordially, can I help you? I don't know why she didn't run immediately to the police, but anyway, she says, can I help you? So kind of as he turns to face her, because he couldn't like see his face at that point, she immediately recognized who he was. And if you go to Google again, you can type in Maitreya and you'll see some of the pictures of him and his turban and all that. I mean, she looked dead in his eyes and she knew immediately who it was. So she freaked out because she had been blowing the horn on this guy. The bottom line is she was so freaked out, she was never to be heard of from again. She asked people like Doug Hagman even to, kind of just let her kind of fall off, the face of the world. I was actually recently contacted by someone who's apparently close to her, and I actually know the city she's in, or at least apparently to this source, who I do believe. And I don't want to, necessarily give it away, but I mean, she has moved. She won't talk about it at all, but she was on record as saying Maitreya was the one. She did so on Brent's radio. But anyway, the reason why I say that is, guess who's going to claim this experience, the illumination of conscience, after it occurs? Because he'll be out and about. He'll arrive onto the scene. It will be Maitreya. It says so in his own apologetics. I've seen it with my own eyes that he will claim this illumination of conscience, and he'll say, I was the one that caused that sign. Come to me. Come to Papa. So that's what I'm saying. We got to be careful now of how this gets twisted after the fact by the New Age. So very, very interesting times, to say the least, and I'll allow you to jump in.
It is very interesting times. Now, I've got a couple more questions come up here from guests. This one comes from Jesse, and it says, ask him if he knows anything about the alien armada coming towards us. It's maybe there's something missing there, but it says ARMADA.
I'm not quite sure what she's talking about, but I failed to mention this point, which may answer her question indirectly. I mentioned this earlier in the broadcast, that what the New Age are saying these stars are spaceships. That's how it's going to be pitched in the mainstream. So when we finally see that star that's up there for 6 months to 2 years, you're going to hear the mainstream media talking about, well, that's a spaceship. The good aliens are here to help us, so to speak. And that's why I think personally that we're going to be set up for this whole good alien versus bad alien situation where, we've had the ET element being pushed into, the entertainment industry, whether it's Independence Day or ET or, whatever movie you like. But I think they will stage some sort of phony alien invasion, to wherein these quote-unquote good aliens will kind of come onto the scene and save the day. And again, the quote-unquote good aliens, from my research, are going to be these fallen angels in the flesh who will say that they're here to help humanity, through the crisis, through the tribulation. And so there's going to be a battle, because I can tell you this, I have no intention of backing down, Michael.
Oh, I don't either.
Who knows at this point, where we'll be. I do believe that God will allow me to continue to work and to continue to be vocal. So whenever they show, whether I'm able to do radio shows or not, I mean, we're obviously going to be blowing the horn on whoever they say they are. And so it's going to be an ultimate choice. It's like, are people going to come back to Christianity, or are they going to keep moving on into the New Age and follow this Antichrist and his fallen angel cohorts and the demons of the air? But that's what they're going to say. That's all I can tell you is they're going to say it's spaceships in the sky. And they've got whole pages worth of this stuff of people, writing into Share International. And that's, by the way, if you want to know the website for this Antichrist figure, it's just go to Google and type in Maitreya, Maitreya, Share International behind it. You get his website. Start looking into it, because, folks, that's what's coming. All these things that they're talking about, all the world's problems they're going to solve, poverty, homelessness, environmentalism, all that good stuff, they are going to apparently, quote unquote, solve. And it ties in with Agenda 2030, which is kind of interesting. Michael, now that I think about it, I was talking about this with my guest today, Father Stretnanovich, who's a traditional Catholic priest out in California, because he was listening to my talk on this, and he says, well, it seems to be a good indication that that 2029, 2030 will be kind of the heights of the Great Tribulation. And it makes sense, because if Maitreya does show in 2023, let's say, after this star sign, 7 years, the 7-year tribulation brings us to 2029, which would be the heights of the tribulation. In my opinion, will be the 3 days of darkness. So I will tentatively throw you out a date right now, based upon the information I have, that the 3 days of darkness would be right around 2029, 2030. And that ties in with Agenda 2030, which I find interesting, because wasn't it at one point it was Agenda 2050, and then they moved it up 20 years? Correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought they moved up, like, even their timeline on when they wanted to get across their Agenda 2030 programs.
Apparently, they've got a whole bunch of agendas, and none of them are any good. This stuff comes. It'd be nice if it came while I'm young enough to fight. You know?
Yeah,
So,
yeah, I hear you.
yeah.
Well, that's what we got to do, at least on this level. It's an information first, and an information war first and foremost, and that's what I say continuously. And that's why you
Yeah.
just got to keep getting out there and exposing it. Listen, I don't claim to be infallible. I've been wrong on certain things in terms of timing. I can just put it out there and say, okay, well, maybe this might happen. There is a more general flow, if you will, from a traditional Catholic prophetic timeline. But in terms of actual dates and months, I try staying away from that. I mean,
All
with
right.
when's Planet X actually going to get here? I mean, I don't know. None of us really
Well,
know.
you'll know when it's here, I imagine.
Well, oh yeah.
And Jesse,
But you know what I mean ahead of time. I mean,
Jesse says Jesse's not a girl. All right, Jesse. Sorry
Oh,
about
okay.
that. And we've got another question here. Can you ask your guest what he thinks about the reptilians? I imagine you would think the same as you do for any alien, right? No?
Yeah, I mean, with that, yeah, we're probably talking demonic. I know David Icke kind of talks about that, kind of a crossbreed. Again, I don't know. People throw out terms like Anunnaki, and I mean, I actually do believe in Nephilim, which is kind of interesting because I've had people who studied Nephilim on my show. Gary Wayne helped me out here. I had recently on Jim Vieira. Remember he had on that show on the Discovery Channel or History Channel where he discovered all of the giant skeletons in North America.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of who else, some of the other Nephilim guests. Oh, I'm going to have on Steve Quayle here soon, too, by
Yeah,
the way.
there's Steve Quayle. There's what's his name?
I forget. There's another main one.
Marzulli.
Yeah, Marzulli. Yeah, L.R. Marzulli. He is actually going to come on and maybe talk about the alien, because he agrees with me that it's demonic, too. But I don't know. He said he was traveling somewhere, and I don't think I'm going to be able to get him on in March. But, yeah, listen, there were giants in the Old Testament. We know David slew Goliath. And what's kind of interesting is that from the Talmudic viewpoint, again, these are what these certain Jews are saying. They say before their Messiah returns, the giants return, the Nephilim return. So, you immediately raise your eyebrows, even as a Christian or a Catholic, like, really? Giants are going to return? Or whatever these things are, And I think this, Dabu 7 just recently came out yesterday and did a little piece on how they found another giant skeleton in Iran, which seems to be credible. It doesn't seem to be photoshopped or anything along that line. You have these, accounts of red, hairy beasts, out in the Afghan area. I mean, I don't know, folks. Listen, I think anything going forward is really not out of the question, given what our Lord said during our times when he said, the times are frightful and men's hearts will faint, basically, in anticipation of what's going to happen next. So, ultimately we're talking about a Luciferian, the Luciferians kind of coming out party, as I described on SGT Report with that whole, what was that tunnel called out there in Europe where they did that whole song and dance with Baphomets and satanic.
Not sure, but I was
the Gothard Tunnel thing in Switzerland.
I would guess, people see these huge ships in the sky. I mean, there's been sightings like the Phoenix Lights and things. So why not have giant people aboard? I mean, and this planet used to have a lot of giant stuff on it. So I don't know why it's so hard for people to believe that there was giants on this planet.
Well, yeah, it is in Scripture. As a matter of fact, when we look it up in our traditional Catholic Bible and you just type in giants, it's referenced 17 times. And they were known to be, men of war. And it just ties in with the New World War. And you see the predictive programming even in the entertainment industry. I mean, look at some of these movies that have been coming out recently. The Gods of Egypt. What was that? The Jason and the Argonaut movie was remade. Some of these other War of the Titans, I think, was one of them. Then a recent one I just saw was that BFG movie by Spielberg, Big Friendly Giant. So, they're throwing the predictive programming out there. And, who knows what essentially is going to happen. Now, during the 3 days of darkness, I can tell you again, every devil will be let loose. And the Blessed Virgin Mary says, the evil will just be so horrifying to look at that you will die of fright just by looking at them. So she quite possibly is literally describing Nephilim in that situation, because she basically kind of distinguishes not only between the demonic, but just evil like creatures. I mean, I don't know. It's up for interpretation. All I can say, I kind of first dismissed it at first some years ago and say, oh, that's nutty, just like I did with Planet X. But you start studying this isn't prophecy.
I really have in this show, I've learned not to dismiss too much. There's so many things that I used to think, come on. And now I've seen enough to say, well, that it's a damn well a possibility. So, I don't. That's why people get mad. Oh, why do you shun flat Earth, but you talk about Planet X? there's very few things I don't touch, and that's just one of those things I don't get into. But the Planet X, there's a big possibility there, so I have to cover it, because if it happens and I don't want to go out as people thinking, he knew something and didn't tell us. If I know, I'm telling you. So just like anything, we get the proof. There's a lot to this whole Planet X thing. There's so much. It's easy to blow these things off, but
Sure.
I've seen enough to say, I don't know. Again, I don't throw too much in the trash unless I have absolute evidence that it's BS.
Well, one of the areas, Michael, I didn't mean to cut you off, but one of the areas, let's take a look at the underground bases. Why in the world is the Vatican and world governments have been building underground bases for well over 50 years? It doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out if they're seemingly planning on going underground. That means something ain't going to be right up here on the surface.
Well, right. And they've made some of these facilities. I've seen photos and video of these things. I mean, they've got farms below ground. I mean, they're literally growing food. They've got stores and malls and all kinds of stuff underground. People think, they put it right in the category with fairies, but in little green men. But I'm telling you, this stuff's true.
Well, hey, we even have celebrities now coming out and buying some space, if you will, in these apocalyptic chambers underground. We've got CEOs saying they're prepping now even too. We did a report on that recently. Like, everyone's kind of sensing something, You don't have to be Catholic. They're sensing something, but that something is like, okay, what is it? And like our Lord summarizes it in the gospel. Men's hearts will faint, based upon what is happening and what they anticipate will happen next. And so it's like, okay, you have our Lord saying that. It's you need to sit back and take a Xanax or something and be like, whoa, it's got to be something just so beyond our comprehension, even that, all we can do at this point, Michael, is really try to do our best to piece together all of the pieces to this puzzle as best we can. I don't claim to be infallible. I've changed opinions at certain times on things, as I'm sure you have. I at least have to put out a caveat on certain things to kind of ease my conscience. Like, okay, say this based upon the knowledge that I have. And if I don't know something, trust me, you'll hear from me. I mean, I'll just say I don't know. I really don't know.
Me too. Now, listen, we've got one more break we've got to take care of. But before we take it, of course, I opened up this can of worms. So now somebody has asked what your thoughts are on flat Earth. And go for it, and then we'll take this break.
Yeah, I personally don't believe in it. Again, these certain Talmudic Jews talk about it. And once I see anything connected with them, I immediately... I don't really go too much further. I can just say that it kind of ties in with the Talmudists and even Freemasonry. Through approved Catholic sources, it's always talked about that the Earth is a globe, circular. So I base my opinions off of that for whatever it's worth. But I personally don't believe in flat Earth. I mean, I've covered it in 2 or 3 blogs, kind of showing the connection between Freemasonry and these certain Talmudic Jews who are preparing the way for the New World Order. I think, for me personally, it's kind of a giant psyop. I really don't even know what their end game is.
Oh, I totally agree with that, Eric. Hang on with us. Let's get this last break out of the way, and we'll come back and finish up. Flat Earth. I seen Peter Kling having his battles over on Facebook, or Fakebook, I should say, with all these flat earthers, and boy, he calls them out, and they come out of the woodwork. It's like roaches that come out. I'll tell you, they get mad, but I mean, come on, look. It's a globe, folks. It's a globe. It's a freaking globe. And so, folks, we're going to get back to it here in just a moment. I got to tell you, I got a lot of people who have messaged me, last few years anyways, about that whole flat Earth thing. And if you find it insulting that I just don't buy it, oh well, go pet a puppy. I don't know what to tell you. I've seen enough evidence and to say that it's a globe. And, people... They got an excuse for everything. Well, that's fake. This is fake. All right, well, just prove it. Go to the edge, find the edge, take a nice, good photo. Now, I want to make sure it's not Photoshop. So I don't know how you're going to prove that to me, but I'm sure you'll find a way. If you are smart enough to think of the flat Earth, you'll be smart enough to find a way to get a photo that could convince me that we're on some disc here flying through space. Hey, to each your own, listen, I'm not here to make friends. I'm really not. If that happens, great, but I'm really here just to get to the truth, whatever that may be. And that's what it's really all about for me. So, if we offend a few people on the way, I don't mind it. It's part of the job. It's going to happen. My guest here tonight is Eric Gajewski, and he's talking to us about Fatima, about One World Religion, Planet X. 3 days of darkness, and some of you may not agree with that. That's okay. The good thing is that we come and we listen to all this. I mean, there's some nights that we go through things that I don't totally agree with, but I'm not rude and rotten and interrupting. I mean, I'm trying to learn. Who knows? I mean, nobody really knows for sure everything. So, that's how you learn. You learn by listening, not by knowing it all. So let's get back to it with my guest. The website is www.latenightinthe.midlands.com. Feel free to go on over, become a member, be informed, and by all means inform others. Now, I'm going to try and take a call here. Let's see what happens. I'm going to give it a shot. I believe we have Papa Bear on the line with us. Papa, that you?
Yes, sir. How you doing?
And I got you. Well, welcome aboard. I'm doing fine. Me. Yeah.
Unreal.
Well, hey, we're on this disc together, buddy.
Disc?
Hey, you're on with Eric, by the way.
Yeah, nobody caught me on my show last night, I guess, because I was talking with a guy from Australia, and he says it's been 90 degrees. It's been really warm down there. And, well, for some reason, the sun is up longer than it's down. So, I don't know. If this is a disc, it works pretty funky, Yeah,
well, I guess so. But what's on your mind?
It's working just like a globe. So, I don't know. I mean, like I said, the guy was on the show last night, and I had to ask him. So, I need to calm the fears of these flat earthers, and let me have it. Give it to me straight.
So, well, some of them are purposely misleading others, and then there's some who really believe it. And I'm not going to go judging anybody. I guess I already have a little bit, but for me, I'm not with it. But you got a question or anything for Eric?
No, actually, I just wanted to drop in the flat Earth thing. The also, you're talking maybe 2020 when this was supposed to happen. I don't know. That might be a little bit conservative, but I'll kind of run with it. I thought it would be earlier than that. I mean, Stephen Greer already talked about this with the false invasion, if you will.
Yeah.
And the only way you'll be able to tell the terrestrials from our craft, is by the seams. Terrestrial craft is seamless, but it's going to be mixed, and it will be a false flag. Yeah.
All right, Eric, are you with us still?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I didn't know if we screwed you up with this call. Skype has been really touchy with us.
Yeah, no, I hear you. I have problems with Skype all the time. So, but yeah, I mean, definitely we see what's coming as a cosmic false flag. The date, I think you were trying to mention with the star sign will be 2022. But I wanted to preface by saying, I mean, you're going to see more of the alien propaganda in your mainstream media. As a matter of fact, I'm going to reblog another article coming from the mainstream saying, there's 60 other Earths, out there like our own Earth. And again, in my opinion, I'm only speaking from what I think. I believe it's just all to get people in a certain mindset that there is interplanetary life out there and that there are indeed, quote unquote, good aliens coming, when from a traditional Catholic prophecy perspective, it's always reiterated over and over again that it would be demons of the air working together with the Antichrist. Now, I don't want to suggest that all of these things that we're seeing in the sky are necessarily demons of the air. They have advanced technologies where there are these, even the Nazis were working on certain planes and stuff like this. So I don't want to undermine that. But you made an interesting point. Go ahead.
Well, there was something cooking at the South Pole when Admiral Byrd went there. So, I mean, that was a 6-month deal. It only lasted a month. We lost a destroyer and a U-boat. And they came back pretty quick. Why do you send 5,000 men down there to do, some sort of research? It's crazy.
Yeah, and to follow up on what your point in terms of what I believe we're going through a pole shift right now. Our Lady of La Salette, basically warned about this, and I encourage you all to simply research this message. If you just type in the message of La Salette, and you'll see the actual words, because it's basically a rewrite of Revelation, but it's very specific, and it's kind of like Our Lady really giving it to churchmen in the Catholic Church, saying, you're completely worldly, you've turned your back on Christ. I mean, it's really strong language that she's using. But the one thing that she said concerning this pole shift, she says this: the seasons will be changed. The earth will produce only bad fruits. The heavenly bodies will lose their regularity of their movements. The moon will reflect only feeble reddish light. Water and fire will lend convulsive motions to the earth spheres, causing mountains to be swallowed up. So, that's a pretty precise description of where we're moving towards, and that's why I keep track of all these earth changes.
Well, I see a pole shift coming pretty soon. I mean, even the Inuit people are talking about the sun setting in a different place now, and the wind currents going different ways.
Yes.
So things are a lot different up there. And of course, we know there's a wobble in the planet, in the rotation, because we've got this polar vortex going on now, and that's highly abnormal.
Yeah, there's a lot to consider in all this. I've had on geoengineering experts on my own show, such as Dane Wigington, Alana Freeland, who gets into this a little bit. I would argue that there is a hand of man in there somewhere. I mean, they're able to control and manipulate weather too via HARP and scalar technology. But for me, the big picture is Planet X. I mean, I know that they can create storms out of nothing and this or that, but I mean, they're not going to be able to produce on a natural level what we're going to go through, like during the 3 days of darkness. There's no way they can produce something like that.
Exactly. I see it being sooner, though.
You might be right. You might be right. I mean, certainly you're going to see the major trend, I think, is going to be Christian persecution. Because
that's already happening.
Yeah, but I mean, like to a level to where we're thrown in jail over it. I mean, I know to a certain level we are, pro-life movement. You go out there and you protest abortion, you're thrown in jail. But I mean, like on a massive scale, it would be a crime against humanity to be a Christian at a certain point. We will go in hiding, basically. The Catholic Church is going underground. That's what the early church fathers said. And you won't want to go out publicly and say, okay, I'm a Christian, because you're going to have to deal with the majority rule, if you will.
Yeah, it's a crime almost to be straight. It's a crime almost to be white these days. I mean,
well, you see, I'm from the tribe of Judea, because we came here in 1640. Okay, so we're one of the what you might call a founding tribe, and the Catholicism is what we escaped. Okay, this is what the Protestant thing was all about. Okay, so that's where I get where I'm coming from. But I come from Daniel, the Revelation, the book of Daniel. And Daniel's timeline, according to that, it appears to be really, really soon.
Well, there's a lot of timelines out there. I can suggest mine based upon, my vast knowledge of what Scripture and tradition say. And again, I can only speak from a Catholic perspective. We believe as Catholics that those early apostles truly knew, because not everything Jesus taught was in the Bible. It's one of the differences between Catholics and Protestants. There is what's called oral and written tradition. So those early church fathers had things to say about the Antichrist and eschatology that most people aren't aware of. And, when we see like the early church fathers saying that Rome is going to turn back to paganism. So at a certain point, you're seeing these. Yeah. I mean, that's what's happening. I mean, it's being set up. You see all this weird artwork in the Vatican, all these, paganistic I mean, that's where we're headed, folks. I mean, there's no question about it. And they're going to drive Pope Benedict soon from Rome. So
the lower section is all pagan. I mean, what's with the fish mouth on the head, There's all kinds of satanic symbols. There's just way too many. And I don't know.
All right.
I don't know. Anyway.
Well, Papa, listen, thank you so much for the call. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me on.
Oh, you bet. I do appreciate it. We're getting low on time here, but we had another call. Robert, if you want to call back in, I'll get you on. And then that'd probably be the last call we'll be able to take. I got a question here in the chat as well. Let's see. Is it too taboo to ask the guest if he believes in the gay agenda? Well, I don't know why would you even ask that? Of course, I don't think, I mean, of course not. If he's Catholic and he believes in what he's preaching, no, he doesn't go for the gay agenda. I'm sorry for answering for you, but am I right?
Well, yeah. I mean, listen, the man of lawlessness, that's what Antichrist is called. He's got to open up a can of worms, if you will. I've kind of described the New World religion just as a WWE Royal Rumble where anything goes. So, I mean, you could be a feminist, you could be a sodomite, you could be a transgender. And most people don't know, but there's Luciferian implications behind that rainbow-colored flag that they stand behind. And so I encourage you all to kind of investigate that. I've done blogs on that. But essentially, yeah. He's going to be a pacifist. There's been some of the church fathers even suggest that the Antichrist would be a homosexual himself, a sodomite, which shouldn't surprise anyone from a Christian perspective. But yeah, it's all propaganda. The Catholic Church has always taught error has no public rights, and so from a Catholic perspective, there's a natural union between a man and a woman. Without being lewd here, there's a reason why God made male body parts and female body parts, and so we stand behind the natural law. We don't believe that. These other groups should be licensed with quote unquote constitutional rights, and this offends God, and this is one of the reasons why this country's about to get it. I mean, don't think we're escaping this unscathed.
And I always say there's no stupid questions. There really isn't. It's just I didn't. Sometimes you don't know if people are what they're trying to do, and I'm like, well, he's kind of into the whole Catholic religion. And being growing up knowing a little bit about it, I'm gonna say no. The gay agenda is not acceptable. But to each their own. Now we've got Robert on with us. Robert, thanks for calling in. What's on your mind, buddy?
Well, Michael, thank you for taking my call. I'm glad to see that your lines are starting to work again. I know how frustrating that has been for you.
Oh yeah, well we're gonna have it all fixed by tomorrow, I think, where they'll definitely be working. But yeah, so tonight, so far, God willing, they're working. So great.
Yeah, it's a wonderful thing. And plus, you got the trifecta going on tomorrow night. There should be a hell of a show. Yeah, Eric, it's a pleasure to talk to you. You know, I followed you. I followed your work, though. I was born Catholic. I'm a religious atheist, so to speak. You know, I follow my own train of thought and path in how the construct of the universe has really been developed. I listen to a lot of different people, and I always keep an open mind, and I try and gather my thought process from all sources. I think you're a hell of a researcher, by the way, though I know you come from a Catholic perspective. I'd like to know what you think about the idea of us being engineered as a race spacefaring races that have come here to participate in our development as human beings.
I'm not honestly really sure what that thesis is, to be honest with you. I mean, obviously as Catholics, we believe in the whole creationist, God created Adam and Eve, and using that as a starting point, if we're kind of talking like Darwinism and all that, the church has condemned that. I mean, we don't follow any sort of
I'm not talking about Darwinism, because Darwinism actually has nothing to do with that. The whole survival of the fittest species. I'm talking about us being genetically engineered as human beings from spacefaring races that have come to Earth, and through their genetic manipulation have created us as a species here on Earth. So I'd like to get your take on that, if you do have a take on that.
No, yeah, I mean, we're just creationists. We believe that God just created something out of nothing. I mean, he created, not only everything that surrounds us, but just man and woman, from the dust of the earth, basically. We don't believe in any sort of, there was a race that came previous to Adam and Eve, and then we kind of, transitioned or move along, and we're kind of constantly evolving. That kind of ties in with the New Age. That'll be basically what Maitreya will preach here. In avatar fashion, that we need to evolve. He teaches karma and reincarnations, and we have to constantly keep evolving. I mean, this to us would be the doctrine of the Antichrist, not of Christ, from a Catholic perspective. And I can only speak from that.
I got you. And then you did mention, did you say reincarnation? Do you also, from my understanding, by the way, is that the part of reincarnation was really truly left out of the Bible purposely. Do you follow that line of thought, Eric?
No, the Catholic Church condemns any notion of reincarnation. And again, that would tie in with the New Age doctrine, and Theosophy, and people of the same mindset of Maitreya, essentially. It gets really, from a Catholic perspective, it gets bizarre, and I realize that there are other people who have different opinions on it, but yeah, I mean, we believe that, once the soul, at the point of your death, you will be judged. What's called a particular judgment. You'll either go to heaven, hell, or purgatory, and then there's eventually a general judgment where everyone will have to stand before Jesus Christ and give account for their life and every word and deed. But there's no coming back after that point and kind of like re-evolving or anything like that. We do believe in the resurrection of the body eventually, but it's different than how the Theosophists and certain New Age people talk about reincarnation, I guess. But yeah, there's a lot of different, opinions out there. I mean,
the only reason, I'm sorry, Eric, the only reason I mentioned that is because, the resurrection of Christ would, embody the idea of reincarnation. And I mean, I guess that's the reason I bring that up, is because if, Christ was able to be reincarnated, and there have been, hundreds of stories, literally at this point, thousands of stories of people talking about reincarnation, young children bringing up the fact that they've been reincarnated, it's all in very vivid in their minds, explaining who they were in a past life, even being able to point out in some cases they're killers. Through their reincarnation, came back very quickly. And in one case, in one instance, I think it was in Scotland, the individual actually, through forensics, police forensics, was identified and jailed. It was quite extraordinary. I'm just wondering, how that ties in through, if there's a tie-in through the whole Catholic religious process, you know.
Yeah, no, like I said, just in general, that Catholics don't believe in karma or reincarnation, if you will. I mean, Christ was resurrected, but it was still the same soul. It was still his body, if you will. But it's not as if I was like a tortoise or something in a previous life, and now I'm a human being. I die again, and then whatever I'm a spider web or something like that. I mean, it's not what Catholics believe. We believe at the point of death, our soul will ultimately know its fate in the particular judgment, and ultimately in the end there'll be a general judgment. So. Yeah, I mean, I know. Listen, I've got a lot of friends who, have left the Catholic Church, unfortunately, from our perspective, and who believe in karma or reincarnation. But it's something the church that has always taught against. But I realize there's a lot of different opinions out there with the advent of the internet, and I can only stick and teach with what the the early Catholic Church fathers said, how the church has always taught. And that's all we can really do is just regurgitate that. I can't go outside of those boundaries.
All right, Robert, thank you for the call, but we're getting just about out of time. Eric, what I'd like to do is give you the floor to get out anything that you'd like. And I mean, this night has just flown by. I thank you for being here.
Yeah, well, great. Well, maybe hopefully, next month or something, I could delve into the message of La Salette, specifically in Our Lady of Heed, which I didn't get too much into tonight. But that is very telling, basically a rewrite of Revelation, but more specific. And I just, like I said, I appreciate you allowing me to come on. I appreciate all the calls. I think as Catholics we have to keep open lines of communication, and without having like some knee-jerk reaction like your previous guest and like labeling him a nut job or a loon bin. All I can say is no, we disagree, and we leave it at that. On the basis of points of doctrine. I think if you can do that in charity, people will begin to hopefully see what we're saying as Catholics is the truth. Kind of walk the walk instead of just talking the talk. And I just my message overall is a call to repentance and conversion, call back to prayer life. It's very fundamental. So if I can help anyone who has questions about the Catholic religion or anything we've talked about tonight from a prophetic standpoint, because I get a lot of priests who will ask me questions from all around the world because they know that I've studied this pretty in detail. And I would just offer to them, message me at apostleofmary@hotmail.com, and I'll be sure to, I even take time out and I do Skype sessions one-on-one. I'll call them on the phone, and, I try to be as accessible as possible. But I think the bottom line in all this, whether we, die in the 3 days of darkness, Michael, or, God forbid one of us goes out to go get some Fruit Loops here tomorrow and gets hit by a car, I mean, I just say, have your soul prepared, no matter what. That's basically, my message.
Hey, it's always good to be prepared. I mean, there's nothing wrong with keeping a little extra water in the basement just in case, right?
Yeah.
Be prepared.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. And so, yes, we definitely are preppers, if you will. Prudently prep. I'm not suggesting, go build yourself an underground bunker or lair,
Well, I mean, even like you said, prepare your soul. Hey, there's nothing wrong with doing that. I mean, what's the worst that can happen? It works. I don't know. So
yeah, from a Catholic perspective, that's it. Always be ready for when, from our perspective, Jesus comes to visit. We always want to be on guard and on watch, as Jesus said, watch and pray. And that's it. And hopefully your listeners learned a little bit something tonight, especially with that star sign. Again, that's what they're saying, the year 2022. So basically, in a nutshell, from 2017 to 2022, this world's going to be turned upside down on every level. And so the reason being is we get a lot of people now who, with Trump being in office, everything's good. I got a great gasp of air.
Well, it's not all that good though. I mean, because all the zombies are coming out of the woodwork now. They're coming up out of their graves and making noise. So, we'll see what happens. But Eric, I thank you so much for being here tonight.
Maitreya and some of the connections between Scripture and tradition, and why I believe he is the one that will show up onto the scene after the economic collapse. But yeah, Blavatsky certainly was a foundational piece, if you will, for just the whole New Age movement, just kind of in general. I mean, when we study Albert Pike and his morals and dogma, it's very clear that Freemasonry in and of itself is a worship of Lucifer in the end. And there have been certain notable Jews and Freemasons to come out and say this. Now, your everyday Mason doesn't know this because there's ranks. And so they're, more of your as we talked about before, the impotent humanitarianism. I mean, they're out, and it's kind of like a brotherhood, but you can be a part of any religion and be a Freemason. But it's also ultimately this specific sect, which these Jews are using to ultimately subvert the Catholic Church and doctrine, and ultimately bring about their new Messiah, who will rule from the Third Temple, as mentioned before.
Okay, and our caller had hung up, so okay. So, but I got more questions here.
Yeah.
Ethug asks, but I remember a day when we actually had names, and it's so funny. So it's Ethug. Okay, Ethug asks, could you ask the guest if he thinks the anti-pope is involved in the international trafficking of child sex slaves?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's a couple of websites out there. I think his name is Kevin Arnett, and I don't want to give credence to him because he's got a very weird belief structure. I mean, I saw a video the other day on him where he's talking about God and using it in a feminine sense. So he's got a very strange belief structure. But listen, as a part of this satanic cabal, which has overrun the Catholic Church, there is certainly these ritual sacrifices going on. I have no such proof that he is actually in on it, if you will, as some people are suggesting. But I do believe he's a high-ranking Freemason. So let's say if that did come out one day in some sort of court of law, I mean, would that surprise me? No, it wouldn't at all. And as Father Malachi Martin, before the Second Vatican Council, there was actually a formal enthronement of Lucifer in the Vatican, in and around Rome. And it actually took place in South Carolina, too, in Columbia, South Carolina, in the early 60s. So it was kind of like an ode to Lucifer, like, hey, it's time to get the New Age rolling. Let's get Vatican II in play. Let's implement these Freemasonic principles, and let's start preparing the world for the formal New Age and the New World Order in general, which from an economic level, as many of you should know, it's going to be highly socialistic, ultimately socialistic Marxist in the end. And it's one of the things that the seers at Garabandal had talked about, kind of a communist tribulation period before this warning event occurred. But yeah, that's a good question. In general, yeah, there's definitely satanic ritual sacrifices going on. The pedophilia is tied into it. There was one such case in Chicago where Father Malachi Martin alluded to. There was one priest who actually killed a nun, like at Mass or after Mass. I forget exactly how the story goes, but he was tried and ultimately convicted of killing this nun in a ritualistic murder. So they're hiding behind the collar, if you will. That's what people have to understand. Just because you wear a bishop's mitre, that doesn't mean you're Catholic, folks. If you're not following what the Catholic Church has always taught, you're not really Catholic. You're Catholic with a K. I mean, you could profess to be Catholic like Pelosi. I mean, Pelosi's anything but Catholic. So, don't fall for the nonsense. 9 out of every 10 people, if not more, who identify themselves as Catholics, sadly, due to Vatican II, aren't on the objective level. And I'm not trying to condemn their soul or anything. That's for Jesus to judge. But objectively speaking, they're not following the Catholic religion because of this Vatican II Council.
All right, I'm going to give you just a couple more here, and then I'll let you get back to what you want to talk about here. When will we be able to start seeing Planet X in the sky, and where?
Yeah, that's a good question. Listen, I've had all the top Planet X researchers on. There's some like Steve Olson who I think would argue you could see it right now. For me, I don't have an honest answer. When I feel that I'm not qualified in that sense to give you an answer, like, okay, like, it will happen here, like a time frame. I can't do that, really. I don't think really any of us really know. I had David Mead on, who would be a great guest for your show.
I've talked with David Mead. I've talked to, I don't know, there might not be too many I haven't encountered.
Okay, good. So you've had David on. Well, he's suggesting that, in the very least, towards the end of this year, he thinks maybe we'll be hit by a comet, which ties in with end-time prophecy, by the way. We know Wormwood in Revelation will be hit by a comet. So I've been telling people for years, get off coastlines, get out of major cities because of the economic collapse of martial law coming. Get out while you can. And there's a good number of people who are taking that advice and wanting to move, by the way. I get, people emailing me all the time, where to go, where to move. But anyways, and this ties in with Catholic prophecy as well. St. Hildegard talked about this end time comet to hit, and specifically America being affected. Lost my train of thought. So with Planet X. Yeah. Now, for me, the kicker in all this, the climactic event is going to be the 3 days of darkness. And this kind of ties in with CERN, which I think we talked about slightly last time. These New World Order freaks are trying to open up a Stargate, a wormhole, however you want to put it, to literally merge dimensions, to merge the immaterial with the material. And this is where I guess, again, I would argue that we're not dealing with interplanetary beings. We're going to be dealing with interdimensional beings, kind of like in those, what's that movie, The Avengers, where they shoot that thing off into the sky, a black hole opens up, and you see all these, these
Yeah.
really weird creatures coming through from the other side. I mean, that's literally how the Blessed Virgin Mary describes it to Marie Julie Jeheni, and she said, "Listen, if you're not inside on that Thursday or Friday or Saturday, you will die of fright. And if certain measures are not taking place to do certain things like get blessed candles from a traditional Catholic priest, you will have no light in your house." On the basis of those who are not in a state of grace, if you will, who are leading ungodly lives, they will perish in their own homes, even if they're in their homes, due to fright of the thunder and lightning that will be occurring. So just imagine that on the basis of just how powerful the thunder and lightning will be. And I know, listen, I actually like, thunderstorms. I think you mentioned you didn't.
I'll be one of those people under the table.
Okay, yeah, well, just imagine it to such a degree where after three days, basically, it's 72-hour period, where as Planet X gets closer, I mean, just the effects it's going to have on this planet are just unimaginable. I mean, just the shaking alone, as certain Planet X experts have described it, I mean, it's going to be like we're being locked on like a magnet, and we're going to shake literally for 3 days straight, like a 10.0 earthquake. Okay, I have never sat through any earthquake, and I've had friends who said, a 5.0 is pretty scary, even just for a minute. Can you imagine 72 hours of just the whole world shaking? It's called like a mini judgment. Our Lady of Heat suggests. We can get into that maybe a little bit too.
Did you say 72 hours?
Yeah, this thing will be locked onto us for that period as it's making its orbit and going back out into deep space. At its most closest point. Yeah, it'll be locked onto us.
Would that not lead to some kind of pole shift or continents kind of moving around? I would think.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I believe we're going through a pole shift now. We're seeing weird weather. We're seeing snow in Hawaii. Snow is being reported upon in the Sahara Desert and some Middle Eastern areas. Some funny videos out there on YouTube. These people are like seeing snow for the first time. Like, what in the world is this stuff? It's not supposed to snow in certain areas of the world, at least under normal circumstances. So I've had on Ben Davidson. You probably had him on as well. I mean, we've talked about this. Magnetic reversal, pole shift. He also believes in the thesis or synopsis that eventually, as Planet X gets closer, the magnetosphere will go down. And that's another point that Anthony Patch brings up, that I had him on again for the second time a couple weeks ago, where he said that due to the CERN program, it's affecting our force field, if you will, our magnetosphere, and it's decreasing it. So if you want to know my honest opinion, I think they're trying to perpetrate kind of a fiery sacrifice. I mean, they want the magnetosphere to go down, so ultimately this CME will come down and burn or scourge a third of the earth, which comes from Revelation 8:7. It comes from the message of Akita, wherein the Blessed Virgin Mary says that this fire coming down from heaven will spare neither priest nor faithful. The people who survive that particular aspect will find themselves so desolate they will wish they are dead. That was also relayed to Blessed Sister Ayala, where Blessed Virgin Mary actually starts mentioning specific countries that are going to get chastised. Russia is one of them. A decent portion of Russia is going to be burnt up in this CME, this fire raining down. But yeah, it's definitely a very interesting topic. And like you, I kind of sit back and listen to those who really do this more on a daily basis, and I try to absorb like a sponge and say, okay, we can give a more general time frame. Now, we'll get into the star sign later. The 3 days of darkness, in my opinion, is in the very least about 12, 13 years away. I don't think it's right down upon us as, like before it's news is reporting.
I'll tell you this. We get into a three days of darkness, and I'll be thinking of you and everybody else who's come on this show and warned me that was coming.
Well, listen, yeah, and that's one of the things, hopefully, God willing, we're able to do. I keep a track of certain things.